way live from the lower bottoms of West Oakland. This is Soundwaves. And today we have a special guest. A few weeks ago, we had on Angela Walker, the Green Party VP pick. And today I'm talking with the presidential candidate from the Green Party, Mr. Howie Hawkins.
Hello.
What's going on, Mr. Hawkins?
How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
Mr. Hawkins has been an activist for a long time, the majority of your life, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
And what a lot of people might not know is that he was born in the Bay.
Yes, sir, I was.
So we were just talking about his Bay roots. So I appreciate that. So, Mr. Hawkins, before I did this show, I asked some friends if they had any questions for you, because we were pretty excited for this particular interview. And a good friend of mine had asked this question. He says, "Is it possible to oppose Trump and support a Green Party or Socialist Party USA candidate? Is a vote for a third party really a vote for Trump? If winning the election is unlikely, what is the strategy in running what some might call a doomed campaign? Why should people vote for you in particular? What is the history of the Green Party here, and what ultimately led you to found a new party in the U.S.?" A little bit of a multi-layered question.
Yeah, well, first of all, a vote for the Green ticket is a vote against Trump. It's
Right
in
on.
the Green Party column, not the Trump column.
Right on.
And if this guy's in California, he don't need to worry about it. Trump is toast. In California, and probably nationwide. I mean, he's sinking like an anchor. So you got a miserable choice then between Trump and Biden if you're at all progressive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Biden's record is, he was a crusader against busing for school desegregation. He was a fiscal hawk and voted for the Reagan tax, reforms. He was a war hawk and, rallied the Democrats for Bush's war in Iraq. And then when it comes to the kind of progressive reforms that Bernie Sanders advocated, Trump is opposed. So if you're a progressive and you think you got to vote for Biden to stop Trump, you're basically saying you're supporting a candidate that said he'd veto Medicare for all if it crossed his desk. That's Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that joins with Trump to say we should overthrow the government of Venezuela and install the president there, as if we have a right to do that. So you vote for Biden, you're a progressive, you get lost in the sauce. They don't know you're a progressive when you do that. Everybody knows what the Green Party stands for. You put your vote in that column, and that sends a message. And then you make the political system come to you. So what we're doing is advancing these issues. I mean, we're facing life or death issues. Obviously, the coronavirus, Trump is a loser. Coronavirus won. Trump gave up. But where is Joe Biden? I mean, why isn't he beating Trump up over the fact that we don't have a test, contact, trace, and quarantine program like every other organized society in the world that has suppressed the virus? The two governing parties are presiding over a failed state. And Biden has the platform. He could point us in the right direction. But where is he? He does. When you think of Joe Biden, what issue is he the champion of? Really?
I honestly can't think of anything other than when I think of Joe Biden, honestly, I think of Anita Hill, like his political legacy for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, he's the legislative architect of mass incarceration. He drafted all that legislation in the Reagan and Clinton era. He was the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate.
And he still stands behind it.
Yes. So, he could, but what I'm saying is he could be beating Trump up over the fact that we need universal mail-in ballots if we're going to have of an election in this pandemic. These are not ideological issues. These are common sense issues. And he can't even do that. So I say don't waste your vote on somebody that's not going to provide any real solutions to the problems we face. And I said life or death. We've got coronavirus, the pandemic of racism, centuries old. Everybody can see it now. People say defund the police. Biden says, no, we're going to increase funding for the police.
Give them more money. Yeah.
Yeah. And, my answer to that is there's not enough budget in the police budgets for what racially oppressed communities need that have been segregated, discriminated against, and exploited for generations. We need to defund the military and put that money into a Marshall Plan for the city. I think that's where we need to go. The climate meltdown continues. Biden has a pro-fossil fuels policy, all of the above energy policy. He and Obama, presided over that, and they brag about the fact that the U.S. is now the world's #1 oil and gas producer. That's not helping us with that life or death issue. And then we got inequality. We've had growing inequality for 50 years, and now working class life expectancy is in decline. So we're calling for an economic bill of rights, right to a job guarantee, an income above poverty, building out public housing the right way so everybody has opportunity for affordable housing, Medicare for all, lifelong public education, and a secure retirement by doubling Social Security benefits. And then the other issue that none of them are talking about is this new nuclear arms race. Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist has the doomsday clock the closest they've ever had it to midnight. The last bilateral treaty between the United States and Russia on strategic arms expires next February 5th. We're saying we need some peace initiatives, cut the military budget, bring our troops home from these endless wars, pledge no first use of nuclear weapons, and then go to the other nuclear powers and say we want complete and mutual nuclear disarmament with the support of the 122 nations that agreed to the text of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons 3 years ago. And that should be a top campaign issue. And it hasn't been talked about. So these are why people should, support and vote for the Green Party, because we're going to make these issues something that the political system has to deal with.
Now, just to get back to some of your domestic issues, because I do want to touch on, while I have you, a lot of these international issues, but I actually work in housing. I work at one of the emergency shelters here in Oakland. And one of the issues that I see with public housing in this country is that it's very punitive, the way we look at public housing. How do we change the mindset of things like public housing?
Well, we need to approach it like they do in Europe. You don't have to be poor and a minority and put in a development that's in the worst part of town, isolated from opportunities, public transit, good schools, jobs. In Europe, anybody can go into public housing. You can be a professional. You can be working class as well as low income. And we can build public housing that does that. Our eco-socialist Green New Deal calls for creating 25 million units over the next decade of affordable housing, public housing. That would be mixed income. We'd reserve 40% of that for low income because there's 7.8 million households that don't have access to affordable housing. So that would cover them. And then it would create units that begin to desegregate us by class and race. And they'd be quality developments. We'd build them for clean energy. We'd coordinate that with the building mass transit in our cities so we can have walkable communities. So it'd be a jobs program, an energy program, a desegregation program, a walkable communities program, as well as an affordable housing program. I mean, you can build a real coalition around that. So that's what, when we talk about public housing, it needs to be done the right way. We haven't done much of it since about 1970. Instead, we subsidize private developers, spend a lot of money. It costs more per unit to subsidize. And then when the tax benefits run out, they gentrify the units or just tear them down because they let them run down toward the end of the tax benefits and just flatten them. So we're actually losing affordable units under this subsidize the developers program. So it's cheaper to build units directly through the public sector.
Oh, I'm with you on that one. I also saw that the platform, the Green Party platform, endorses public banking.
Yeah, I'm saying the six biggest banks, which account for more than half of all assets, all deposits, all customers, should be public banks at the federal level. And they can be a yardstick for all other banking at that level. And then they can partner with, credit unions, community banks, uh, public agencies to finance what we need, which particularly now is rebuilding our productive systems for zero to negative greenhouse gas emissions and 100% clean energy. We have a good example in North Dakota. That state bank's been around for 100 years. It's always returned a profit to the state, but it partners with credit unions and community banks. They have more community banks, locally owned private banks in North Dakota by far than anywhere else in the country. And their whole banking system just goes right around the Federal Reserve. And so they finance farms, businesses, student loans, homes. It works well. And, we need to develop this at the municipal and state level as well, because then you can target your loans to what the communities need, whether it's housing, clean energy, or medical clinics in communities that don't have them now, that kind of thing.
And what about postal banking? Have you looked into, or what is your take on the postal banking system?
Well, I was radicalized in the 60s coming up in the Bay Area. I mean, we had what we called the movement back then, capital T, capital M, and it was civil rights and it was anti-Vietnam War, early ecology movement. But one thing that really got me going is in 1967, Johnson shut down the postal bank. And I've been saving, my little money from paper routes and mowing lawns and that kind of thing. And I buy these $5 certificates of deposit and put it in the postal bank. And suddenly I had to pull that money out, and the commercial banks wasn't interested in me. I'm a teenager. So that was another radicalizing experience. We need postal banks because we have so many people that are unbanked. The commercial banks don't want you unless you keep a certain level of deposits. And then if you're, small business, they don't want you anyway. You got to, start a business on your credit card and with your family and friends. So the postal bank can help people, stay away from the payday lenders and all these other predatory lenders. So I think it's a great idea, and the infrastructure's there. The Postal Workers Union wants it because they need more revenue, given that a lot of traffic is now online. And until the coronavirus pandemic, they were, covering their costs with postage. And everybody says the postal system is in trouble. That's because Congress, which really wants to basically run them into the ground and privatize them, made them pre-fund their health care and pension benefits for 75 years.
Jesus.
So they're supposed to pay now for people that aren't even born yet. It's insane. It's designed to bankrupt the postal system. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And, right now, the postal system is in big trouble. They're saying it may run out of funds. It may be bankrupt by September, which means how are we going to do universal mail-in ballots if the postal service is shut down? It's a big crisis. And postal banking is part of the solution.
How do we, and this is kind of a question I've been asking a lot of people, and when I had Angela on here, I definitely asked her even more specifically, how do we start to build a stronger Black left? But how do we, because the left to me seems not as organized as it was in the 60s. How do we build a stronger left movement, especially in the time of Corona?
Well, Corona makes it more difficult, but I believe we have to become organizers and not just activists. Activists preach. We got an answer, we write up a leaflet, we go hand it out and say, join us. And, in Black communities, and you're from the left, even if you're Black, but, the left is mostly white, they're like, who the hell are you? You show up with the answer. An organizer goes out and listens. And they say, how can I help? What's going on? and they build relationships and friendships and over time trust. And then when things come up, people in a black community will say, well, we know these people and we know they're with us and we trust them. So, let's see what they're talking about. I think coming out of the 60s, we got over impressed with how in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, just mobilizing on the streets, we got results. And so people said, well, we don't need organizations. We don't need a party. We just need to demonstrate. But if that's all you do, we're usually lobbying the Democrats then. It's a militant form of lobbying. And they can give us some lip service, but basically ignore us because they can take our votes for granted. I think that's what happened in the Iraq War. I mean, in the anti-Vietnam War movement, our slogan was out now. And we put that demand on the so-called anti-war candidates, Kennedy and McCarthy, who were saying, negotiate now. We're saying, no, there's nothing to negotiate, out now. And then when it was Humphrey and Nixon, we didn't say Humphrey was the lesser evil. We demanded out now on both of them. And Nixon won, but then, his plan along with Kissinger, the secret plan to end the war they talked about, was actually to use tactical nukes against North Vietnam. And we had the massive October Vietnam moratorium in 1969, and then massive demonstrations exactly a month later. And that scared the hell out of Nixon and Kissinger. Mm-hmm. They said, we can't execute our secret plan and get reelected. And we didn't know it at the time, but we basically won. And that's because we kept our demands. We remained an independent movement and put it on both. Go to the Iraq War, the broadest coalition, United for Peace and Justice, when it came to 2004, their slogan was against the Bush agenda. In other words, vote for Kerry, who was pro-war. I mean, Kerry's argument was, I can do the war better than Bush. He wanted a surge that ended up bigger than the one Bush got. And what that did to the peace movement was kill it. I mean, Bush won, and people kind of shrugged, and then Obama won, and they said, well, the Democrats in there won't have to worry about it. But we're still in those wars. Mm-hmm. So I think we got to build organizations. The new left, the old left knew how to build organizations, and the new left had good criticisms of the old left on a lot of grounds, but they threw the baby out with the bathwater. We got to have organizations. We got to learn how to organize and go into the communities of the people that don't vote. The 100 million people that didn't vote in the 2016 presidential election, predominantly working class, disproportionately people of color and young people. And so we got to organize. And that's something that we can't do in the 4 remaining months of the campaign. We can begin to do it, but we got to continue and build, grassroots organizations, grassroots chapters of a third party where people know us. And so when the propaganda about us being spoilers or whatever, Russian assets or whatever they want to throw at us, people say, no, we know these people. We know they're with us. And it won't be able to, that propaganda won't work on us.
What's frustrating is I haven't seen a third party candidate on a major news outlet probably since Ross Perot.
Yeah, I was on Australian Broadcasting Corporation program, interviewed, and the last question they asked me, if you could get on the American mainstream media, what would you tell them? Mm-hmm. And I would tell them we should be regular commentators. We're a legitimate part of the political spectrum. We have serious ideas. And, your duty as journalists is to give people the whole story. And then I complimented the Australian Broadcasting Corporation saying, you're doing better than our mainstream media. Thank you for having me. So that is a big challenge. I mean, Jill Stein, our presidential candidate in 2016 for the Green Party, did get some segments on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox. But, the narrative was, the major party candidates. And then, oh, by the way, here's the third party candidate, usually introduced by the question, so why are you spoiling the election?
Yeah.
And of course, that's the first question I generally get. And I say, no, it's the Democrats spoiling the election. We've been giving them the proven nonpartisan solution to spoil elections in presidential elections since Ralph Nader ran in 2000. And that is to get the Electoral College abolished and have a ranked choice national popular vote for president. And if I ever do get on the debate stage, I'm going to ask Biden, will you join me in supporting that? And I'm afraid he's going to look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? He probably doesn't even know what it is.
I was going to say that.
And definitely Trump doesn't know what it is.
No.
But, that's something that, Bill McKibben took to the pages of the New Yorker saying I should drop out and campaign for ranked choice voting. But if we're not in the election, nobody's going to pay attention to us anyway. So that's one of our issues. Let's end the spoiler problem and let people vote for what they want and not fear supporting the people they fear the most.
Now, speaking of Brother Bill McKibben, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Did you, and I know there's an socialist aspect to the Green Party platform. Did you have a chance to watch Michael Moore's documentary, Planet of the Humans?
Oh, man, I've been trying to find time to do that. I did get through the first 25 minutes like a month ago. Just haven't been time. I know everybody's talking about it, and it's just one of those things on my list I haven't got to yet. So I really can't say much about it.
What did you think of the first? Because it starts off kind of rough where they show that little quote unquote music festival in the middle of nowhere in Oregon, trying to call out renewable energy. What did you think of the first 25? You refuse to have an opinion until you watch the rest of it.
Well, I've heard they're skeptical about the technological capacities of renewable energy and the resource requirements. And what I've heard from people that have commented on it, they are a little behind on the technology. And they really didn't take on capitalism. Capitalism is about expanding exchange value. The more stuff you sell, they measure that by gross domestic product, and that's supposed to be a measure of the well-being. But if you have an eco-socialist society, you're maximizing use value. So instead of planned obsolescence, you have durable products, which means the exchange value, you want it to buy them as much. The GDP may go down and our usable wealth may go up. And I don't think they got into that kind of analysis of how the capitalist economic system undermines efforts at having renewable energy and clean energy if you don't deal with what is driving this production of things that we don't necessarily need, like replacing your iPhone every few years.
Back to your earlier point about Trump being done. I had author and she's a columnist for Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberly, on the show recently, and we got into a back and forth about Donald Trump. I believe coronavirus is Donald Trump's Herbert Hoover moment, and he's done. His mishandling of this is epic. And the only reason why people even think that he has a shot is because his kind of extremist base, which he's just throwing meat to an extremist base, is just loud. I don't think they're big in numbers. They're just loud. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I read a column by Margaret recently about how Biden could grab defeat from the jaws of victory. He's capable of that. And like Hillary Clinton did, by not giving the people anything to vote for. And, that might, that might have been possible, but, even Trump's base is seeing that emperor doesn't have any clothes. He's running around naked, and people are beginning to say, yeah, he's naked. So I think you're right. The coronavirus, people are scared. He was going to have this big rally in Tulsa, and I know the TikTok teens and the K-pop kids, bought tickets, I guess, online and filled up space. But I think a lot of Trump's own people were saying, I think I'll just watch this from home because I don't want to get sick. And then they begin to realize Trump doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Mm-hmm. So I think he's in trouble on that. Plus the economy, we're plunging into a deep depression. And now this is true of both parties, but as Trump will be in charge, they have a blind faith that private enterprise alone is going to get us out of this hole. But with consumer demand down, because people are worried about covering their essentials when they're not sure about their income, or they may be on unemployment and the extra benefit's going to run out at the end of July, Investors aren't going to invest. It's too risky. They ain't going to create jobs. So that's a recipe for a long depression. We need a big public investment. For us, that's the Green New Deal. We got to rebuild all our productive systems for clean energy and zero emissions. And that's a massive job that we can put people back to work doing. And that can lead an economic recovery. But the two major parties, they're not seriously looking at that. They're debating over whether to give people another measly $1,200
Oh,
one time.
yeah. It's interesting. There was an interview on Democracy Now, I want to say in February before the lockdown happened, with Lori Garrett, who's like an infectious diseases expert. I forget exactly what her title is.
Yeah.
And she actually had mentioned what we're seeing right now with, I don't know if you saw, New York is saying people can't come here from certain states, and Europe is saying we don't want no one from the US, and Texas is saying we can't have cats from Florida. She was actually talking about this, that because we're not unified federally with the way we're handling testing, that this is going to be a huge problem when it comes to supply chains and even trying to get tests and medicine, because it's going to be states competing with other states, competing with countries to get supplies as far as PPE and even tests. It's just been a botched, kind of disgusting handling of something that I wouldn't say would be easy to handle, but
Well, it's not that hard. It's a logistical problem. The military could do it. The Defense Production Act could be invoked. We got big companies. I used to work for UPS. They're a logistics company. I prefer we did it through the public sector, but they could have been contracted to do it. And instead, it's every damn state and every damn country for themselves bidding up the prices, and it's a disaster. Lori Garrett saw it coming. I caught her. I didn't catch her on Democracy Now. I caught her on cable news, and she was right. And now we're in this terrible situation where we're on pace to have 250,000 COVID deaths by the end of the year. If Biden can't beat Trump in those circumstances, the Democrats can't do anything.
I feel like their strategy is just because he seems to be in a bit of a cognitive decline. I feel like their strategy is just lay low, and all you have to be is not Trump. That's it.
I saw an interview where Biden basically said that's his strategy. I can't remember where I saw that, but I had a double take. Did he really say that? I paused the TV, ran it back. Yep, he said it.
It's crazy when you think about it, because the thing that when I was going back and forth with Margaret, we were talking about this whole Trump thing, I was like, 2016, you don't know who he is in 2016. There's a lot of people that are fooled by the image of the rich businessman that knows it all, that kind of Atlas Shrugged narrative that you get kind of shoved down your throat, of the rich guy can fix everything. And now that he's been in here bumbling for 4 years, showing how ignorant he is with a horrible cabinet, the proof is in the pudding now.
Yeah, I at that time I was still working at UPS, and I know some Teamsters that voted for Trump basically because they hated Hillary Clinton. To them, she was like the suit at Human Relations, and they get injured on the job, and the suit fights them to take disability instead of workers' comp because it doesn't cost the company as much, and the benefit is half as much. I mean, Clinton to them looked like the people that was, keeping them down. Trump was an unknown. So people, kind of shrugged and said, well, let's give him a chance. Let's shake things up. And now they have buyer's remorse. And, still, I mean, those people, if Hillary Clinton and her campaign had, they were campaigning against Trump on Russia.
Oh.
Like, nobody cares about Russia. They care about jobs, healthcare, those kinds of things, housing. And this guy was a target-rich environment. His criminal rap sheet is a mile long. He's a failed businessman. Just talk about the casino. How do you lose money owning a casino? Every time his lips move, he's lying. And he's a racist, and he's alienating almost the majority of people in the country. So and instead they want to talk about him being a Russian puppet. look, I think the Russians probably did something just like the U.S. does. That's what intelligence services do. But that was a stupid campaign message. People weren't voting on Russia. They were voting on economics. And Clinton offered them nothing. And so I guess Margaret's argument is Biden's offering them nothing. Watch out. But I think you're right. The coronavirus, health crisis, and economic crisis, I just don't see how Trump can come out of that. And he seems incapable of doing anything but going back to the, racist insults. Mm-hmm. He to mobilize his base. There's a base for that, but it's a minority of the country.
Him get because what can he really say? And I don't want to dwell on this too long. What can he really say to Joe Biden? He can call out his womenizing, but I mean that's definitely the pot calling the kettle black.
No, yeah, and that, in fact, he was defending Biden. I saw a clip where, he said, "Well, I've been accused of a lot of stuff." He wasn't going to go after Biden on that. And yeah, I mean, his whole thing was Obama was black, Clinton was a woman. This guy's an old white guy. I mean, Trump don't got a message for that. How do you attack that? Because that's like what he is, and he don't know how to deal with that because he don't have policies. Trump doesn't stand for anything. He doesn't know what he stands for except himself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so I don't know if you saw there was breaking news yesterday that a federal court judge is calling for the release of the kids by, I think it's July 1st or July 7th that are in the ICE prisons.
I did see that. We've had court orders before. The administration is lawless. Is Biden going to, use the stage he's got to call Trump out on that? I doubt it. You may have seen, it was big over here, Andrew Cuomo having daily briefings with social distancing. The cable news networks covered it. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where the hell was Biden? He could do the same thing. He's within commuter distance. He used to commute from his home to the Capitol every day. He could convene the White House press corps, in a room like Cuomo had, and beat Trump up every day or every couple of days. Instead, he's hiding in his basement. It angers me because, I disagree with Biden on just about every public policy, but the testing, contact tracing, and quarantine program we need mail-in ballots. Just those two things. Those are they're not ideological. I mean, they're safe. And Biden, he's not saying anything. He gave a speech in Pennsylvania the other day, and he looks sedated. And I'm not saying anything about his mental capacities, but I'm saying, where's the anger? People are dying. People are losing their jobs. And Biden doesn't seem to feel that. He's just very kind of saying, this is a vote for the soul of the nation. And makes it a character issue. But yeah, everybody knows that. But what are you going to do, Joe? For the people. I don't think there's an answer to that.
I think he's going to get Kamala Harris as a VP pick because there's something about Kamala Harris that scares Trump. And one thing Kamala Harris is good at is just kind of ripping into people on her being in the Senate sometimes in those committee hearings when she's just kind of ripping into people is fun to watch. Her record as a prosecutor, I'm not down with. But I think that's his strategy. He's going to sick Kamala Harris on everybody.
Yeah, I'm not handicapping that. I really haven't paid that close attention. You're right. Harris could play that role. She could be the attack dog against Trump. She'd probably relish that. And I think we'd all enjoy it. But I'm thinking, I'm ready to debate Biden and Trump, but are they ready for me? I mean, first thing I'd say to Trump is, when's Mexico going to pay for your stupid wall? And then Biden, I would say, Joe, will you join us in getting rid of the Electoral College and having a ranked choice national popular vote for president and just get rid of the spoiler problem? And I don't know. He'd probably say no. Or if he said yes, then he's got to make people believe it. But that's what I do with Biden. Will you join me in supporting Medicare for all and things like that? Oh man, I would love to be on a debate with them.
I wish I had the power and the platform to make it happen because I think it would turn the tide in the way people look at the left and the way people look at third parties. Um, when you're stuck with a two-party duopoly, you just feel kind of stuck, and I think that's why a lot of people stay home.
Yep, 100 million in 2016, and that's the future of the left. That's the working class, the people of color, the young people, and but you got to give them something to vote for,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to be not just there at elections, but there all the time, right at the grassroots. That gets back to organizing.
Can you organize via the internet, or do you have to be face to face with people?
I think between phone calls and Zoom calls and FaceTime, you can approximate the face to face, but there's nothing as good as face to face. And I've been thinking about this. I think you can go out with the proper protective equipment, knock on the doors, keep your 6 feet, and ask people, what's going on? What are the issues here? I'm from the Green Party or whatever your organization, and what? Tell us what you're thinking and how we can help. I think that can be done. We're going to have to go out, and we are in some states, and do physical petitioning to get on the ballot. We have appealed to a lot of states to give us relief, and so we can follow the public health guidelines. Vermont put us on the ballot. Illinois said no. We sued them, and the judge said put them on the ballot. And Illinois appealed, and we beat them again in court last Sunday. So New Jersey and Maryland are letting us do electronic signatures. But in Alaska and Idaho and Arkansas right now, we got people out there with visors on, masks, hand sanitizer, getting signatures. And, we're going to make an issue of that because just to get on a damn ballot and have an election, people got to risk their health. And that's just not right.
It's insane. I mean, we just saw in Wisconsin with their special election to I think to block two state judges, and then we saw it recently in Louisville where they had one polling place for 600,000 people, and all those people came out to vote for Charles Booker, who looks like he might be Amy McGrath. That's a huge win for progressives, for the left.
Yeah, and that's why we need universal mail-in ballot option in November. And to have that happen so the states have the funding and the time to prepare, that it should be there by now. Mm-hmm. It's in the HEROES Act that passed the House. But the damn Senate is saying we'll take up coronavirus relief after the July 4th recess, which is 2 weeks after July 4th. So it's going to be the last week of July before they even look at it. That's why I'm so angry at Biden. He should be having those press briefings and every day beating up McConnell and Trump on trying to rig the election by not letting people vote. I mean, he's got the platform and he's not using it. I mean, it just angers me.
Oh, it is frustrating because he just lets the narrative kind of always drift off. And I think this is how Trump got elected. And I think this is why people fear a re-election, because it just drifts off into the crazy stuff that this man says. And he's just full of crazy stuff to say. He says crazy stuff like pro wrestlers say crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, that's, reality TV. I mean, that's what pro wrestling was. It was all scripted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a shame that, the media, they complain about Trump. I'm thinking more of the, CNN and MSNBC wing of cable. But, man, they cover him constantly. Trump sets the agenda. He wants to change the subject. He does something more outrageous than the thing they were just talking about and gets them off. So, people can't keep track of all the things he's doing. It's just Trump, Trump, Trump all the time, which is free name recognition. I mean, now everybody knows who he is, but there's some serious issues that are not being debated. Just that nuclear arms race is one that, what's the policy of the United States on that? How are we going to get out of this thing? Because we're modernizing at the cost of trillions. The Russians are, the Chinese are. They're putting nukes into tactical forces. We had a new tactical nuclear weapon in our warships off Iran back during that crisis in January. Mm-hmm. Trump could have got up on the wrong side of the bed and been grumpy and started something, or, a rogue commander on a ship. And once the nukes start flying, as Daniel Ellsberg points out in his book, The Doomsday Machine, it's automated. They all go, and that's the end of us. And here we are, not even talking about issues in this campaign between Trump and Biden.
I see part of your platform is to defund, back to the international part of the platform, is to defund the military by 70%. I think Bernie Sanders just put an amendment to a bill to defund the military by 10%. As we talk about defunding the police, it is the hashtag du jour. How realistic do you think it is that the next candidate is actually going to come in and really defund the military?
Between Trump and Biden, there's no chance unless there's a massive peace movement demanding it, and we don't have that. Biden has been voting for military budgets for 50 years, and Trump, to Congress, actually put more money in the first budget Trump did for the military than Trump asked for, than the Pentagon asked for. And a lot of those were Democrats. I mean, even Bernie Sanders wants the F-35 based in South Burlington, Vermont. It's the Pentagon puts something in every congressional district for political reasons. That's how the military-industrial complex, buys the support of just about everybody in Congress. I mean, what we want to do is cut the military budget by 75%, put that into a Green New Deal, and then put Green New Deal factories in every congressional district and build a green industrial complex and just change the whole dynamic. I mean, 75% is basically, we picked that because Truman, in the first 2 years after World War II, cut the military budget by 75%. So we know it can be done. But it's really, just a ballpark. It's a peace initiative saying, look, we're going to stop being the world's global military empire. And if we're going to be a superpower for anything, it's going to be the humanitarian superpower, helping the world deal with the climate crisis and basic economic development needs like preventive health care, elementary education, clean water, which for a fraction of the Pentagon budget, we could just build in every country that needs it and make friends instead of enemies. So that's the approach we need, but it's not even a topic of discussion. I mean, I watch a little cable news every night after I, get done with everything else I'm doing while I'm eating. And I haven't heard that discussion, for the last 2 years this damn campaign's been going on.
I haven't heard anybody talk about that. I saw a pretty staggering statistic that I think our military budget is like $686 billion, and we spend $7.5 billion on just the CDC.
Yeah, and if you count other parts of the federal budget that deal with military, like nuclear weapons is in the Department of Energy, Department of State, and Department of Homeland Security have military type forces. And then you got the whole Veterans Administration and the portion of the national debt due to wars. And the number they come out with is 1.25 trillion that we're spending on the military directly and indirectly. And that is, the federal budget, I think, was 4.8 trillion last year. So that's almost a third of all federal spending. It's a waste. I mean, it's not increasing our security. It's more about making the world safe for U.S.-based multinational corporations to exploit labor, get cheap resources, and so forth. It's not for the people of the United States, not for our security.
Mm-mm. So I know you don't have a lot of time. What is your message to help build? Because one big reason why I do this show is I do want to help build a stronger left movement, a more unified. I want to get people in that aren't really into it. I know all the smart guys are into it and they watch the smart guy shows, but how do we get that working class left back?
We got to go to the working class and talk to them. I mean, our movements now are mostly online, and people kind of wait for orders from nonprofits that are funded, if you trace it back, by liberal billionaires instead of, Koch brother conservative billionaire types.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very top down. We don't have organizations where grassroots people can develop themselves in conversations and joint readings as speakers and writers. I mean, if we're going to change the system, we got to be smart. And that means we got to develop ourselves. And there's no institution where that happens now. I mean, our two major parties are memberless. You tell the state I'm in this party or that party, and then you get to vote in their primary. But you don't go to a local meeting of your party and figure out, how you're going to deal with affordable housing problem. They don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the so-called members of these parties are atomized. So they're subject to advertising from the top down. And even our progressive social movements, we got the same problem. We're waiting for Move On to tell us what the next thing is, or whoever it is. We need to act and speak for ourselves. And that means going back to what I was talking about, organizing. We got to build organizations in the working class communities that the people in those communities know, hey, these people are with us. And even if you're not that political, when, something needs to be dealt with, they're the people you talk to. That's how we build a left. And when it comes to elections, we need to speak and act for ourselves, not get lost in the sauce of the Democratic Party where they don't know you're a progressive. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to build a party, a mass party of the left that is building grassroots organization. And that's goes back to organizing, not just mobilizing.
Mm-hmm. Not just protesting, you're saying. Like that's part of it, but that's not
well,
the only
and
part.
Mobilizing, you put the notice out on Facebook in your email list and maybe a little street leafleting, but you're hitting the usual suspects and you're mobilizing the same people. You're not broadening the movement. You're not, challenging people that are not with you to think about what you're talking about. And like I'm saying, you can't even get to that point till they trust you, which means
Mm-hmm.
you got to go out and listen to folks and meet them on their terms. You're in Oakland. The Black Panther Party, when I was coming up in the Bay Area, they got a lot of attention when Bobby Seale and Huey Newton followed those cops around with the law book and the shotgun. And that got people's attention. But what won people over is when they got the stoplight outside Salem Elementary School, where kids
Mm-hmm.
had been run over and the community wanted a stoplight. And the city council was ignoring them. So the Panthers went out there with rifles on their shoulders and started directing traffic to protect the kids after school. And it showed up the cops, so they hated that. And the council said, but they got their stoplight very quickly. That's the kind of thing. The Panthers, they had that storefront on Shattuck Avenue. They didn't come up with a sickle cell anemia program. People walked in and said, we got a problem. Same with school lunches. All their programs, their survival programs, was people coming in off the street saying, this is an issue we need to deal with. And they were there to listen. And so it was, I think, very successful. That's the kind of model we need to be replicating in our communities, and in particularly the working class communities that are the future of the left.
I love it. I love it, Mr. Hawkins. Thank you so much for talking with me this morning or this afternoon where you are. I'm going to have a link to your platform on the episode. Is there anything else you wanted me to link? Oh, your YouTube channel?
Yeah, there's a lot of social media. The website is where you can get to it all, and that's howiehawkins.us. So from there, you can see what we're saying. You can sign up to get our bulletins. You can sign up to volunteer. You can donate, and you can link up to the social media, which there's probably more social media than I know about. That the younger folks take care of that. I can barely keep up on my email.
All right, Mr. Hawkins. I'm going to play some music. Don't hang up.